The shot was clean, and I was very excited at first. I mean, my shaking, just uncontrollable shaking in my body, really high. My heart rate was up. My eyes were wide. I felt just wild with energy, and it was a roller coaster, because then we couldn't find the deer. We couldn't find the blood trail, which was then it was this devastation. Then it was pure devastation and heartbreak and so many feelings. And then we ended up finding the animal, and it had just, because the Pacific Northwest here in Washington State, this is tough out here because we have thick brush, and this deer had crawled into just the most obscure huckleberry bush, like deep down into this bush that it was almost impossible to find, but thank goodness we found it. And then it was, then I was just uncontrollable crying. And it was just these like, oh, no, like it just was so much emotion.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, our special guest is Jess Caldwell, founder of Wildkind Academy, where they teach a bunch of awesome outdoor skills, everything from foraging to hunting to basic survival skills, wilderness medicine, all this stuff. Really important things that you should be learning in your free time. We also talk about her journey as a new hunter and why we both think wild food is so important. So let's dive right into this episode, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. I'm a huge fanatic for handmade, high-quality leather and canvas products. In my opinion, they last longer, hold up better to the abuses of travel, and honestly, they just look really cool. That's why I use Badger Claw Outfitters. They've been making handcrafted products for hunting, camping, and travel since 2011, and that's right up my alley. Best part is they're made right here in the USA and are guaranteed for life. They've got everything from gun leather, belts, custom knife sheaths, wallets, duffel bags, leather and canvas pouches, everyday carry items, and more. Badger Claw Outfitters, made in the USA, built for the wild. I don't know about you, but I always carry a knife. It doesn't matter what the situation is, I'm always reaching for a blade. Whether I'm out hunting in the backwoods, fishing on lakes and rivers, or simply cutting rope at camp, and when I need a tool, I want something that's quality, durable, and handmade right here in the USA. I know that's something you're looking for as well, so go to maloneknives.com and get yourself something that's going to last and look damn good too. This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview conservationists, hunters, anglers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the greatest stories, information, and advice from the best in the world. Where did the idea to start a school for learning about the outdoors? Because the outdoors is a cool place where a lot of people like to recreate, but they don't necessarily always take that deep dive into learning skills and learning how to survive and learning how to hunt and fish and stuff like that. So for you personally, where did this idea come from? Because it's a really good idea. I love it.
Thank you. It really came to me about 2.5 years ago because I was doing my own deep dive into learning about really how to become more integrated into the outdoors above and beyond the day hiking experience. And, with the pandemic that hit, it was really around that time that I lost my job as being a marketing director for a performing arts center because the pandemic closed our theater. And I found myself in this interesting space where so many people were running to Costco and buying a ton of food and stocking up. And there was this frenzy going on of what does this mean? What is our food supply chain going to do? And it just didn't feel, it just wasn't in my timelines to go down that path. I certainly paid attention to the pandemic, but where it directed me was how do I become more self-sufficient? How do I become more resilient? And how do I work with not only just food sovereignty, but a sense of independence in my relationship to the wild, my relationship to the outdoors, so that I don't have to go down this frenzy path of feeling small, feeling insignificant, feeling helpless to a system that sometimes feels really broken.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. It is, I think that opened a lot of people's minds up to how fragile like the world is as a whole, especially every day, millions of people rely on sources outside of themselves to stay alive. Like people often think, oh, well, I don't need to learn how to hunt because I just go to the store. And I'm like, well, what if there was something worse than the pandemic that happened and there was no store anymore, or the supply chain completely collapsed, or some crazy virus came through and wiped out corn? We would be 90% of the world would essentially disappear without corn raising. So I mean that's a scary thought, and I never thought about that until I was in college, and they had courses where we had to like think about that kind of stuff. They're like, well, what if this happened? What would you do? And I was like, it would kind of be a good idea to be a little more self-sufficient. So what's offerings do you have? I know you do everything from, wildlife butchering and hunting all the way up to fly fishing and bushcrafting and all that awesome stuff. So what's the courses that you offer?
Well, this is really the first year that I feel that I have a holistic schedule that I can look to and be excited about for the future. I am offering kind of this wild food series or food sovereignty series where folks can get into intro to fly fishing. They can get into intro to hunting. I teach foraging classes, and certainly between, fishing, foraging, hunting, that's in itself just such a great thing to be able to, even if you're not currently a hunter or that's not something that really that you've considered looking into, these intro classes and some of the master classes that I'll be offering help people to even understand what that is about, and if it's something they even want to explore, because it is hard as an adult to get into learning some of these things and having the mentorship. If you didn't have a grandpa that raised you in the outdoors with hunting as an adult, and I found this to be true because I'm an adult onset hunter, it was really hard to get started. There's really not an easy pathway for us that says, okay, I see the value in understanding, even if I don't really want to become a hunter necessarily, I'd like to maybe understand it. I want to understand how it relates to conservation. I want to relate how my friends or people to understand what other people are doing with hunting, and maybe even to help me remove some of my judgments of it. I think it's really helpful to have some of these offerings that welcomes everybody in, of all different backgrounds as adults, to come together and talk about it and feel welcome to do that, and then have a path forward to take more introductory classes to get them going.
Yeah, and it's so funny because as I continued down the path of doing this podcast, the more people I talk to, the more of them I find out are adult onset hunters, which is kind of like a funny word or phrase, because it sounds like a disease almost. And it is in a way, because it's a lifetime, it's like a lifetime choice you make to live this path. And I found hunting to be kind of what you're saying, very difficult as an adult, because sometimes I hunt with people who've been hunting for their whole life, and it just seems so natural to them. They'll look at the ground and they'll be like, oh, the deer went this way, and I saw this thing over here, and there's this thing on the tree. And it's like, how do you know that? That's just a lifetime of experience that I always feel very far behind. So I read a lot of books about this stuff to try and catch up. But with teaching even bushcrafting skills, I think that's a valuable skill for anybody, whether you like to backpack or whatever, because I've studied some of that stuff in the past when I was maybe in my early 20s maybe, and it really helped out a lot when I did through hike of the Appalachian Trail, just knowing the bare basics of how to do really simple stuff because you're living in the woods. I think that's very important. So how has that helped your life and with hunting and everything that you do? Yeah.
So those are classes that I offer, since I went a little bit off track from what you asked me earlier. But aside from the food sovereignty series, I am offering courses in intro to wilderness survival, 3-day wilderness survival classes, 5-day, 9-day immersion courses into the backcountry. And And even I call it a Wildkind masterclass, but it is really just the 10 C's of survival, of what to have in your bug out bag, what to have when you're backpacking, or to keep in your car or your home, in your vehicle, just these things that you should always have on you to be a more prepared human. So you asked, well, how has this really affected me? Learning direct living skills or wilderness survival skills, outdoor living skills, whatever you want to call them. Maybe they should just be human skills, but it shouldn't even have a fancy title, because honestly, these are things that our ancestors always have known what to do in their relationship with the outdoors and their relationship with nature. And we just have had life be so convenient for us that we really don't need those skills from the four walls of our home or from our work environment, until there potentially is a major shift in our reality or a major upset where the grid's down, or there is some sort of cataclysmic event, or even a small event in which you don't have access to your modern day conveniences in the way that we're used to having them. And so learning these outdoor skills has absolutely changed my life. And it's across all fronts, because what it required me to do, and I've gone maybe further than some, in that, I spent this last summer, I lived 2 months in a primitive shelter that I built. And in order to have dinner, I'd have to make a fire. I wasn't allowed to have a lighter. I didn't have, I had a ferro rod. I had my knife. I had certain things. And I took 2 months of training with the Survival University out in Colorado. And that course really just allowed for me to practice every day, live it, what it means to have to build a fire in order to heat food, what it means to live every night sleeping in the outdoors under a shelter that you make and have to make adjustments to based off wind, weather, all sorts of things, whether you're in the right spot because of animal trails, or whether you are in the wrong spot because of the wind flow. And I mean, there's just so much to analyze. But in this process of me truly learning these advanced woodsman skills, and maybe you call them survival skills, my personal confidence level just as a human, that I feel that I can just walk so much more lightly in the world without this sense of like this looming anxiety that I think a lot of people have, because I have let go of everything and was able to live very, very simply and very comfortably, and probably with more peace than I've had in my heart in a long time, when I let go of the modern lifestyle and said, let me truly feel what this means to learn the skills that make me completely work in harmony with the nature around me. And in that, it's been a mind, body, spirit transformation. It's not just this, skills. It's something that goes much deeper than that, because I guess there is something really that we can all relate to when we know how to do stuff and we know how to be confident in the outdoor environment.
Do you find it difficult to unplug from modern stuff like the internet and stuff? Because I like doing the podcast and I like doing it in these different formats, because my ultimate goal is to get people aware of conservation and wildlife conservation and like just some of the bigger issues that are happening, especially here in the United States where we live, across this country. I mean, there's so many issues that are important to me, like land conservation, all of these issues that are really important to me, but you kind of have to be tied into the system a little bit with the internet and stuff to like stay in touch with these issues. But it's also very much a popularity contest in some ways, like when you get on the internet and stuff. And it like, do you struggle with like turning that off and just like being outside? Because I find that when I'm outside, that's the only time where I'm like not on a computer or a phone or something, because my whole job revolves around this. So it's tough,
Mine too. I mean, I run a business that runs off having a website and responding to emails and staying in touch with people through social media and staying active in that way. And I am very active in all of those ways. I'm a one-woman show. Yep. I facilitate courses. I do the marketing. I run the website. I'm doing it all. So I do find that I spend a lot of time. I mean, I'm working that balance all the time with the time spent doing what I need to do to run what I really want to be doing in life as a career, and my time that's unplugged. And yeah, I think it's difficult just because no matter what, we have a detox process. There is, no matter how we look at it, we are addicted to our devices. We have a chemical reaction to our devices. This is absolutely a truth. And if we have a phone, we have a device, we have already started the addiction process with that. So anytime you make that choice to go out and turn that off, you're overcoming your own chemicals in order to do that. And that has its challenges, but there are studies of how much time it takes to detox and get off of that. And certainly certain amounts of time in the outdoors helps you to overcome that. I think they say, 24 hours or a few hours gives you some kind of upliftment and a change in the chemical response in the brain to a day to 3 days. So yes, there are it is challenging for me, but I also have created a lifestyle where I live outdoors a lot of the time. And so that has been woven into my design for my own just feel good sensation of being a human in this lifetime. One thing that I think people, because I do so much of the bushcraft and so much of these, skills, I'm not one of those people who wished I lived 100 years ago and that life was more simple. I'm really happy to be alive in the here and now. I think sometimes the internet's on fire and I love those days, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of things that come my way and people that I meet. Most of my community is because I met them through Instagram or I met them through whatever channel, but I'm actually quite thankful for this level of communication and this level of interconnectedness that we can have as professionals in the outdoor industry or whatever industry you're in because of these networks. So I'm very thankful for them. And I'm glad to be in the here and now. It's just, it does become part of our lifestyle design to find ways to unplug, because just like the movie The Matrix, that we are completely sourcing a lot of our energy, or I should say we are being drawn in energy from that matrix system. And I think it's part of our holistic health to recognize that and know that we're going to need to refill our cup. And to do that, we're going to have to unplug.
Yeah, I think it's important too. And it's weird because I often know a lot of people who say things like that, like, oh, I wish I lived, 200 years ago. I was like, you would probably be dead by 50 if you lived 200 years ago, because we didn't have a lot of modern medicine. They're like bleeding people out as a way of like healing them, which is definitely not a good thing for you because it taxes your body very, very much so, more than helping it and stuff like that. And then, like you said, if you get a reel on Instagram that gets like 3,000 views or something, that's more faces, people seeing your face or your message in one day than you would have ever met in your lifetime 100 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. It's insane. But it's a toss up. So when you took a 2-month course in the woods, what was the most difficult part? Because a lot of the bushcraft stuff is fun. You're like making things and you're building fires and you're learning these skills. But some of it is like, I'm tired of being cold and wet, and I'm tired of being hungry, and I'm tired of being dirty. What was the most challenging part of that for you?
When you immerse yourself at that level for 2 months, something does change, that you start operating on a different, what's uncomfortable level. Yeah. And it truly does change, because if you just took me and put me in for 3 days at some of the exposure I had, I would probably have more complaints than the 2 month in which everything changes as far as your senses. You become more, in tune with your senses. So you adapt to the cold differently. You adapt to the weather differently. Our bodies really are quite incredible and able to change with the environment. Our minds are able to change with the environment. And I actually did a lot of healing out there. I think my body felt just really good. I had less stress than I had had in a long time. Everything became a bit more simple. If I were to say something was really a struggle, it was the mosquitoes. I mean, that is just no joke that actually becomes a stressor in itself. That I had to, sleep with a net on and I just constantly felt like I was being attacked. And that was that was probably the greatest challenge for me was mosquitoes for sure.
They're terrible. They're awful. When you don't have anything to distract you, like in and out, like throughout the day, like a phone or something, the mosquito buzzing in your ear will drive you absolutely insane. And it is just wild how much that bothers you. And, I've spent months and months outside myself as well when I was backpacking. And it's crazy when you do things like that because your body kind of resets because you're 100,000 times more active than you are in a normal scenario. Like from a physical standpoint, you're insanely active. You don't have that. Like in our modern diet, even like quote unquote, what are marketed as healthy foods are not that healthy, and they're full of like salt and preservative, like all this heavy preservative and stuff, which like makes you feel all bloated and weird. So even if doing something like for the last couple of weeks, I've pretty much eaten nothing but like vegetables, fruits, and meat. Like that's it. And like, I just don't feel like crap. Like when you eat like potato chips or something or a pizza every once in a while. And it's like, but when you're in nature, you don't have that choice. Your body's like naturally in the elements and it's getting all of that stuff out of your system and you just feel like more human. And that's what I've been trying to relate to people. Like, no, you don't understand. Like everybody's scared of the outdoors and nature until they spend time in it. And you're like, this is pretty cool, actually. Like this is way better than like watching television at home because you hear birds and all that stuff. So what would you say is your favorite part about being outdoors in any capacity?
There are so many things, but there is a simplicity that I feel my brain is able to go to where I can take away what I guess I would call just really the stressors of my mind that are especially when I'm in business mode or thinking about, I'm a mom, I have a business, there's a lot that is always processing. And so the choice to go spend time in the outdoors, your senses immediately are going to get pulled into what's happening. So if you're watching a sunset, if you're somewhere where you're in a view, you find yourself in a view vantage point where you're seeing the sun go down and the shifting of colors, I feel that I have got the sensitivity enough to just take that in. And that simplicity I can feel brings me so much joy. Just gratitude to be alive, to feel like I'm witnessing something quite extraordinary. It really is a way for me to change my perspective of what matters, what really is a bad day versus what's really true to the experience of being human. Mm-hmm. And that, wow, if we find ourselves alive and so lucky to be having one of those moments, then it just is a perspective changer. I love my time. I spend a lot of time fishing. I love to go ice fishing. And if I'm in a cold environment but I'm looking around and as far as the eyes can see, it's just kind of white out with ice and you just see into this blue hole and pulling up a fish out of the water. It's really an opportunity to become so present. It's like I believe the outdoors is like a moving meditation. Mm-hmm. We spend so much time trying to get into a state of meditation, or at least if you're somebody who can relate to meditation, we go inward and we close our eyes and we try to do things to help calm and regulate our breath and our sense of well-being and find something more expansive within ourselves. And here you can go out and I feel like you can do the same thing, having a magic moment in the outdoors. It does the same type of thing for me. It gets me hyper present. I feel, just more free. I feel a sense of breathing easy, fully. I find that it makes me breathe harder or less, but everything gets regulated in a way that just is, I guess, what we're trying to do in our indoor environment. Yeah. We do that naturally in the outdoor environment. One thing I think that is important, because I know you mentioned this earlier, about why people should get into skills and why people should get into even bushcraft skills or wilderness survival skills. Mm-hmm. And this is part of why I have an academy, why I have a school for adults for learning. A lot of people, when they hear about what I do, they ask me, so what ages do you work with? Who, they assume it's for children. Mm-hmm. And I would like to get to the point that I have courses for our youth, but all of my courses are for adults, and at this time. And I do believe there's a real need for that. And I do believe our youth look up to the parents to see what they're doing and what's important to them. And I do offer in a lot of my skills classes that for youth 18 and under, depending on what the course is, that they are welcome for free to attend with their parents. So I do feel that that's just a piece that I like to offer so that families are doing this work together. I think that's so important. But, a lot of hikers, you probably know this, but a lot of day hikers, there's actually one of the highest mortality rates for kind of outdoor adventure are just your day hikers, people going out for 4 hours. And part of that is because they don't have those basic skills of what to have with them at all times, what to do if something changes in your environment, if there's an injury, if there is something that's kind of outside of your realm of how you consider your day hike's going to go. People who do overnight backpacking or, weeks of being in the outdoors, they typically don't have as many injuries or as many, accidents. Mm-hmm. They're prepared. They know they're prepared to go out for a couple weeks. People who are just doing those day hikes, they don't have the right gear with them. They don't have the right things that if the weather changes abruptly or if they get lost or, if they're mushroom foraging and they've been looking down the whole time and then they realize they kind of don't remember where they are. It is really easy to get backwards while mushroom foraging, and I've done it. Yeah. So I think these skills become really important, even for people who are maybe not bushcrafters or hardcore this or that. But if you're just someone that wants to have a better relationship with taking yourself or your family or your friends out into the outdoors for even short windows of time, learning some of the basic skills that I'm offering through the academy just start to feel really, really important to being able to have a good time, being able to relax and have more nature exposure because you have that confidence.
Yeah. Taking a step back to what you said about, being present, I think nothing for me really does that more than deer hunting, specifically bow hunting. It's so much more of a challenge because like with a gun, I mean, I don't have any prejudice either way. I hunt all ways. I'm totally fine with it. I'm not like an elitist bow hunter or whatever. But bow hunting is you're attached to a string and you have a very short range of motion. So it's very intimate with an animal. You have to be very still. And for me, I like to hunt out of a saddle. I built my own this year and I just really enjoy that because even like the whole process of setting it up, you have to be ultra present. There's no playing with your cell phone while setting up a saddle. It's like I have this rope, I have this ladder or this climbing stick, and I have to be very cognizant of I'm setting everything upright because you're going 15, 20 feet in the air and you're relying on ropes and rigging and different sorts of carabiners and such. And like you have to be 100% in focus to not screw that up. And I love that. And then when you're up in this tree, you have to be aware of your surroundings. If you can't just be on your cell phone playing games or looking at social media, because deer, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have never once seen a deer come out of the woods. They're just there all of a sudden. Every time I've ever seen a deer, I will literally, the last time I went out hunting, I was up sitting over this valley in southern Ohio. The tree was right on the edge of the valley, and I'm up in the tree, so 15, 20 foot, probably 20 foot in the tree. Below me on the valley side is probably 50 foot down. So I feel like I'm just in outer space up there in the tree. And I'm looking around. It's beautiful morning. It's nice and sunny. And I see this fox running through the valley and I'm just watching it. I'm like, this is cool. And then I look up and there's just a deer in front of me. All of a sudden, I've been staring straight ahead of me for an hour looking for deer. No deer. Look, and there's a fox running away 2 seconds and it's just there. I don't know how they do it. So you really have to like be aware of what's going on when you're hunting. And I can sit without my phone and just like watch a sunset, even if I don't get anything or nothing shows up. I'm just like, this is great. Like you're so there in the moment. And I feel bad. Like that's the one time where I'm probably not on my cell phone. I just check it every once in a while to make sure, like it's not, the hunting hours aren't over, or like there's been no tragedies somewhere around the house or something. But other than that, it's ultra present. So I think you're totally right there. And then with survival skills, I always tell people the most important thing they could ever do, if you're ever interested in any outdoor activity, is learn the basics of a map and compass at a bare bones level. If you can do that, you can normally get out of a situation. Just knowing where the nearest road is. Out west where you're at, you have quite larger tracts of public land where you can get lost than I do out here. But no, do you teach things like map and compass, or do you rely more so on, more natural ways like following the sun for cardinal directions and stuff? Because I use that all the time. I don't always have a map and compass on me yet, unless I'm somewhere I've never been before.
So a few things. In my 2-month course with the Survival University, it wasn't just hanging out bushcrafting. It was 2 months worth of courses back to back. So I took a land navigation course that was 3 days plus an advanced land navigation course, and it was phenomenal. I think everybody should take a course like that. And I currently don't have that on my schedule, but it's certainly something that I would like to get over here on the Washington campus. I do partner with the Survival University for a lot of our courses. I help market their classes. They consider Washington one of their kind of satellite schools. So we do kind of send people back and forth. If I'm not offering it, then they are. And so they do have an incredible land navigation program out in their summer program that anybody can take. It's wonderful. And so that to me was really an incredible eye opener of understanding maps and the topography. The other course that I took there that I'm offering here at Wildkind Academy this spring is a wilderness first responder course. And that WIFR is, I think, a course that every adult should take in their life, whether you are an outdoor person or not. I think most of your audience probably is someone who appreciates.
I would think so, yeah.
But I really think having the medical skills, if you are and let's a couple different scenarios here. If you're just taking a day hike or you're anywhere that an ambulance is not within a phone call, 15 minutes, 20 minutes away, this course is something you need to be able to have. I mean, even if you live remote or you live really, if you live more rural, or even if wherever you live, if we were to find ourselves in in the Pacific Northwest, we're always looming around the big one. There's going to be a big one here at some point. And so whether it's something that just shakes the ground to the point where our road system or our EMS system is not activated to come out and assist, to have the basic skills, not just first aid. We're not talking just first aid CPR, because there are so many things above and beyond that to be paying attention to. And I believe the WIFR courses really help you with situational awareness, really help you to take on the stress of a situation and know how to use your environment around you to create slings and all sorts of things that, like even bushcraft style, that you would need to find in your environment if you can't just, if you're out walking and someone breaks a leg or whatever. Like these skills to me are, every human should know how to take care of ourselves and our family and our friends if something goes wrong. And the off-grid medic, they're out from the south, but their group is one of I've taken a couple different wilderness first responders courses. They're my favorite because they work with bushcraft stuff. So when you're making carriers, splints, whatever, it's what you're going to find in the wilderness to use. And that also helps you to plan what you're going to pack and the kind of things to take on a day pack or a day hike, so that you have you can double down on the things that you have for medical uses as well, and know what things are important to go out with. So I think that's another really important course, is the wilderness first responder. Yes, the land navigation. I go back to the 10 C's, and I actually want to make an online course about the 10 C's of survival, because it's so easy to just pack 10 items with you at all times, no matter what and where, that you can't replicate in nature by itself, like a knife. It would be very hard unless you're an amazing flint knapper.
Hey, what's up everyone? James Appleton here, co-founder of Absolute Aid. Welcome to the Seek to Do More program. This program will help you help yourself by developing the daily habits that will elevate your entire life. Over the next 30 days, you'll complete the doers list every single day. And the doers list includes 1, do something physical. 2, follow and stick to your diet of choice. 3, read a real book. 4, further your education on purpose. 5, dedicate time to your spiritual life. And 6, dedicate time to your hobbies. So if you're ready to take a structured, proven approach to build the daily habits that will allow you to get the most out of yourself, your time, and your life every single day, the Seek to Do More program is your blueprint. So make a choice, commit to yourself, sign up below, and let's get started.
The first aid stuff is definitely very important. I think it should be part of too, like even at a base level, like with hunters, because you're adding another level of danger by carrying weapons. And most people, I shouldn't say most people, I don't have any data to back that up, but generally what I know from the way I've hunted and a lot of the people I know hunt is they hunt together. Like you go out with a friend for the day, or you have a buddy and you're walking through the woods together. I mean, ideally, you have your gun on safety, or it's unloaded until you're in the woods or whatever, or you're carrying it safely. But I mean, people drop things fall over, you lean your gun against a tree and it falls over. I've read stories online about that happening, and it's like, it really would be a good idea to know how to like tie a splint or a tourniquet or something like that, and or stuff the wound with something to stop it from bleeding, because that's always kind of in the back of your mind when you're out there hunting. It's like, or you could trip it with your bow and the arrow cuts you really deep or something. I mean, those are real concerns and real things that happen all of the time.
Absolutely. And I think and even understanding the signs of hypothermia and understanding the signs of heat exhaustion and what's happening when you've got elevation sickness, or I mean, all these things that sometimes you don't know where are happening because you just haven't educated yourself on what the process is to be aware of it, to know what's happening even to yourself, or witness something going on with a friend or a buddy and say, hey, I think we need to address this, because and to your point about hunting, I do find that hunters are some of the most, to me, I've been so inspired by the people I have met who are hunters. They are such incredible outdoorsmen for the most part in terms of their ability to see things I would never see. I mean, it's like they've trained their eyes to see outside of the lines. I mean, they can spot. They can spot movement. They can spot something unusual in the distance. They have the eyes that they've trained themselves to see. I talk about presence, that wind shift, these are things that, I mean, I think they're kind of the modern day Zen Buddhists. What they're able to do with just their awareness training and their mindfulness training. Now, sure, like anything, there's non-mindful hunters and there's like anything, but I have been extremely impressed with what I've learned from hunters just in terms of the presence process. And I think one of the greatest trainings to become someone more present is to take some of the tracking skills, tracking courses, understanding to understand our environment and nature better. I mean, these are great connection pieces to have. And I do find that hunting is a wonderful way to really start a presence practice and being, I guess, mindful, more observant, listening to your gut intuition. Hunting is, and you learn that without knowing you're learning it. Mm-hmm. It's just a progression. I mean, if you were to go to the average hunter that you've ever worked with and you told them that they have more heightened mindfulness, they'd probably look at you and be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's just experience. But I mean, they just have so much time in the woods looking. If you did that every year for 6 months, for 2 decades, 3 decades, like some of these guys have, you just
it's just an inherent thing. And a lot of humans probably had that hundreds and thousands of years ago. It was just natural. They could hear something and be like, that's that bird, that's that deer. And that's something that I work on too, is like, okay, hunting in a tree stand in the Midwest can be pretty boring sometimes. I mean, you can try and be as present as you want, but my attention span isn't amazing. So I'll listen to birds calling and I'll try and remember that call and maybe look it up later, or there's apps on your phone. I don't have one of those apps, but like trying to understand what's around you too. Like, oh, that's a squirrel, that's a woodpecker, that's a badger, just things running around. I think that's so cool too. And you learn the wildlife and you learn how they interact with one another. Like, the deer did not care about the fox. If he would have saw me, he would have cared a lot, but he saw the fox and he was just like, it's whatever. It's really awesome to watch wildlife interact. And so you're an adult onset hunter. How many years have you been hunting?
This was just my second. I've taken training before then. And it's really just been, so it's really not this, I don't have years and years, but it's been, I think, more years of even just, because I should say the first time I went hunting was 3 years ago. But it was more as an observer. I sat in a blind in a antelope archery hunt in Idaho. And that's really what, and witnessed the whole thing. And that's what really got me into it. In fact, that man, he's got a YouTube channel, Silhouette Outdoors, based out of Idaho. He's really introduced me to a lot of these things. And I'm really grateful for his bringing me into this world. But, he used to, when we would just drive in his truck out in Idaho, and if I was on my phone at all for any amount of time, he'd kind of be like, you just missed it. There's a deer. Oh, you missed it. Did you see that shed laid? I saw a shed in the field, and his eyes, I mean, to me, he was my first exposure truly to understanding the mind of a hunter. But even when he's driving, he's watching for every sign of life out there, and he sees stuff and he calls it, and it just, the more I was doing this, even on a drive, the more I missed so much. And it was really an incredible wake up call to just how much is going on around us, even that we choose to block out because we're on our phone, and we're missing these moments of training our mind to see in a different way throughout the landscape. So that always left an impact on me, that there is always an opportunity to see the wildlife and to see the things you're missing.
So the first time that you actually killed an animal, what was that like for you? Because I've been hunting for about 6 years now, give or take. And I remember the first time was a wild roller coaster, because it's not a cut and dry experience. Like, if you catch a fish, you reel the fish in, and then it's a pretty cut and dry, done and over process. Whoa.
Sorry, that was my heater kicking.
But with a larger animal like a deer, it's not just oh, that was fun. It was this is a ordeal. This is
oh yeah,
it's just a whole different ball game. So how did you feel about that? Yeah,
so interesting. So thankfully I had a mentor with me. Joel Turner he was my archery coach, and he's really has a wonderful program called Shot IQ that I went through his clinic and learned his processes. And thankfully he was there to kind of help me through it. I wouldn't have been able to do it alone. There was just too much to know what to do beyond the beginning stages of, tracking and, preparing for a hunt and doing all your time working with the bow or whatever your weapon is it took me a year of just, getting some of these things dialed in, and let alone you have a successful hunt and now you're processing an animal and all that goes along with it. So for me, when I shot that blacktail, at first it was pure excitement. I mean, I didn't hesitate to take the shot, that I was already mentally completely there to take that shot. And because I'd been through that mental training of not, really being present with the shot, knowing the decision was made for me, that this was going to be the path I take. the shot was clean, and I was very excited at first. I mean, my shaking, just uncontrollable shaking in my body, really high. My heart rate was up. My eyes were wide. I felt just wild with energy, and it was a roller coaster, because then we couldn't find the deer, we couldn't find the blood trail, which was then it was this devastation. Then it was pure devastation and heartbreak and so many feelings. And then we ended up finding the animal, and it had just, because the Pacific Northwest here in Washington State, this is tough out here, because we have thick brush, and this deer had crawled into just the most obscure huckleberry bush, like deep down into this bush that it was almost impossible to find, but thank goodness we found it. And then it was, then I was just uncontrollable crying, and it was just these like, oh no, like it just was so much emotion, and I was so thankful, and it was great to have a mentor there to help me process the animal, which was a lot of work. But that Christmas, I gave everybody, in my close circle, that I gave them meat for Christmas. And there's nothing else that you're giving. You go to the grocery store and you buy a bunch of meat. You're not calling up your friends and you're like, hey, I just got a bunch of meat. Come, here's your present. Come grab it. But when you put in a year into something and you give it all of your heart, and you give it all of your mind, and then you have this meat that is from your personal experience and journey, and then you give that offering to your friends and family. It was just the most important gift I had ever given, I think, which was, I consider food as love, and this was a love exchange of the highest regard.
I think that's really awesome that you put it that way. It's so much different when you take an animal and you're processing it and you're eating it and you get that step from like start to finish. It's just not something that people are getting the experience of. I mean, to hunters, it's just another day, and for me, but to the average person who lives in the city and doesn't ever have any experience with hunting, it's such a foreign thing. And you cannot describe the whole process to them, because for me, my first deer, I was very like, whoa, this is wild. I don't like, what do I do? And I had a friend with me. So we track the deer, similar situation, just like hours of tracking this deer, trying to find it. We find it. And then you do all the dirty work. And then, like, this is great. And the second deer, I was by myself. I got him with a bow, and it was like, okay, I've been through this before. I will go up to the deer. I'm like, I'm so happy. And I'm like a little sad because you just killed something and watched it die. And then it's almost like a switch, like it's time to do this work now. And it's like, but it becomes, do you find this process a little strange? Because it's like, it becomes the deer, and then at a certain point it becomes the food. And there's just this point in the middle where it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's once you've done all the dirty stuff and start breaking the animal down, then you just see it and you're like, this is food now. But when 3 hours ago, it was a deer. And it's just nobody has that experience. It's wild to me. It's just a wild roller coaster.
Yeah. And it's so interesting how we all have, you just described it in such a great way, where at some point in the process, you're now seeing, tenderloin, what a transition, right? In our mind from, seeing a living creature to then seeing, how, processing it differently in your mind. And we all have these different ways of, I guess, getting to that point where we're comfortable with our food. A lot of people have no problem taking an egg and hard boiling it from the chicken coop. That's just an easy to accept type of food. Some people don't, then the next step is maybe you see a fish in the grocery market, or you see something that is a fish, but you still can process the idea of taking it home and filleting that fish. Or you take your first fish out of a lake, you catch trout or something, and now you're turning that into a meal. That seems to have an easier understanding in our in how we look at that food. And maybe you should have been started with wild plants. You go out and you see some stinging nettle, and how do you figure out how to turn that into nettle pesto? I mean, we have these things that we can start to do that help shift us into food sovereignty. And then you get all the way out to big game animal, and how that is our connection to big game animal, and how is that different? How is that going to change our experience with it? I keep saying it, but I relate to food as love. Food is love. Yeah. Food is what nourishes our bodies and what gives us strength and vitality. We all need it. And that quality of food matters. You mentioned earlier about eating chips, and the things that are in our current standard diet are so horrible. Terrible. That, I mean, not only is the what their fillers are, I mean, from MSG to just GMOs and all the things that are going into the growing of our food, it's a real tragedy. If we were to expand that out and look at in the face and see how food was made, and see how what they call food really is just toxic chemicals or toxic growing practices or toxic farms. I mean, we were to look that in the face, we would never eat that food. It would be an absolute disaster to our nervous system to see that we were putting that kind of hate into our bodies, that kind of just lack of regard for life into our bodies. And so that is actually just like the anti-nourishment is what typically people are eating and calling food. And that's why it gets me into, that's why I'm a holistic health coach, and I went to college for health and well-being, and I'm a yoga and mindfulness instructor. And then I am certified with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And then I offer sessions, one-on-one sessions or group sessions with people to talk about things like food and holistic health and seasonal alignment and all these things that matter to living in a more full, alive way. So if you're eating food that has, say, MSG in it, chips, anything that has all this stuff in it, you're actually harming your taste buds. You're literally like destroying them, and you become numb to where you're not actually even tasting anymore. You're just having more of like an experience of addiction. Yeah. And it's not even really a real food nourishment, whole mind, body, eat, nourish, grow experience. It's actually just part of our addiction and a numbing sensation. So start to remove some of those things. And now you're talking about wild game, wild food. And yes, they have different tastes, but gosh, the opportunity to hunt has created for me a new channel of tapping into energy and food in a new way that really has been an eye-opener for me, because I do think about the energetics of our food. And I would love to even suggest when I look at something growing a wild, what some people would call a weed, maybe it's a dandelion growing in the grass out in the front, but something that they put chemicals on to destroy. Well, look at that weed. It has so much life force that it is very hard to kill. It doesn't require much to grow. It can grow, a wild rose, rose hips can grow in harsh conditions, and it doesn't need all of this nourishment from a human to say, oh, here's a little bit of fertilizer, and let's make sure you have plenty of sunlight, and let's not let the wind harm you. These plants are like, I got it. They're hardy, and that life force that goes into that plant. I think there's something to then that exchange of harvesting a wild plant that has so much resilience. And I do think about the energetics that I think bringing and incorporating wild plants into your diet that are different from the plants you get at the grocery store, your tended to lettuces and these delicate things that have been so nurtured. I just don't think there's as much of a robust nature to those kind of similar vegetables that everybody eats all the time, that are grown in mass production in soil that's probably not all that great. And then you're adding into that they're just we're not getting the variety of diet. We're not getting the bitters, and we're not getting the things that maybe taste not as sweet, but they have all of this benefit to the human body as far as what they're offering. So the wild foods, I think, are an incredible source of energy to bring into our diets. Pure love.
Well, a wild grown anything is going to have a higher nutritional value just because it's living in a diverse ecosystem. Like, you're going to get different minerals from the ground and actual, like, from water that goes through all of this stuff and into the ecosystem. And, animals are all, excreting, and then that's natural fertilizer. It's like all this stuff is in natural plants, and the stuff that we're growing on a farm is the same. It's may not have as much nutrients. It still has some nutrients, but it's not going to have like the same as a wild grown anything, because it's just like part of a very, very, very diverse ecosystem with micronutrients and organisms and all this stuff that your body has like evolved over millions of years to be in part of, part of this stuff. And that's, so there is some like logic behind all of this stuff, and people might think it sounds like weird and hippie-ish or whatever to say stuff like that, but like, it's scientific, factual information at the end of the day. And have you found, I even find with wild game, there's still prejudices against certain types of wild game. Like, I don't know anybody that would be like, deer, like, it's a little different for me, but it's kind of like beef. That's fine. But then you're like, well, what about squirrel? And they're like, oh no, that's not like, well, what's the difference really at the end of the day? You'd eat a rabbit, but you wouldn't eat a squirrel, even though they're pretty similar. Do you find that like it's hard to overcome prejudice like that yourself? Because I was that way for a while. And then I started hunting with more people and trying different foods. And I was like, none of this tastes bad. At the end of the day, none of it is gross. Some of it is, not everything's a 70% fat beefsteak. Like, if you have that expectation, you're going to be disappointed. But like, food is food. At the end of the day, meat is food. Animals are food.
And what's incredible is the difference between when you're hungry. When you're hungry, and I have been hungry because I put myself in those challenges. Part of my 2-month program was doing a 7-day solo with no food resources other than what I was able to harvest, whether it was pulling crawdads out of the river or harvesting wild plants. Now trapping is illegal, so that's not available, but you never know. Sometimes you find squirrels. And sometimes, you eat what you can eat and it's incredible how great things taste. Anything tastes when you're hungry. So that's something we're not used to, is actually being hungry. That's one thing. But I do understand our relationship to critters is different based off so many things. The best stew I've ever eaten was beaver stew. The only thing I've ever not liked, and I did not like, and I'll never eat it again unless I absolutely had to, was bullfrog.
I could see that.
And I'm open to trying pretty much anything, but oh man, bullfrog's just weird, and it's an invasive species here. So it's great to me, it was like, oh cool, what a great free food resource that's abundant here in Washington State, that you can go out, and they're kind of fun to go out and hunt because you're in kayaks with headlamps on in the nighttime. And I used a bow, and you're just kind of reeling them in like a fish. But cooking up frog legs that are like moving in the pan, and that's a little weird. And like, this is like a day later, they still are twitching and moving in the pan, and then they look like fried chicken. So they look like fried chicken, but then you go to take a bite and it tastes reptilian, and it's just that your brain's like, I'm not. Well, it can't all be amazing, so I couldn't do that. But, and then there was, for me, an emotional connection. On my birthday, I had a squirrel, and it was the first time, it was 2 years ago on my birthday. It was the first time that I held the heart of a squirrel in my hand and ate that first, as a way to honor the animal, and to just take a moment of presence with what, that this was a life form, which is a whole nother conversation about how we honor life and through the taking of life. And that I do think there's a place for that in our regard for all life. I think hunters do have the unique fishermen, hunters, we all have a unique ability to be that close with our food sources and have an opportunity at least to have so much regard for that animal. Where if we're just buying packaged meat from the store, even though people who are anti-hunting, who are meat eaters, there is something they are really missing that the path of the hunter offers us, which is total eye to eye, looking into that animal, being accountable for that energetic exchange at some level. There's just nothing like it. But holding that little squirrel heart, I had quite an emotional reaction, and maybe because of how small it was. But our ancestors, a lot of them, small game is typically easier to harvest than big game. Big game animal hunting, especially with primitive tools, is no joke. And although they had it way dialed in, and they had community and hunting groups. So there was a whole way of hunting that we probably are not accessing or able to do in this day and age the way that our ancestors did, or historically was done. But, small game was a big part of the diet because it is so much easier to trap small game. Big game is something that we really are. It's a whole nother gig, but it is interesting to try the different meat from antelope to, elk, everything. There is a different texture, but just like the plants, wild plants versus what you're going to find like spinach at the store versus stinging nettle, that you can literally put them side by side. Stinging nettle has more vitamin C, more iron than spinach does. And it's got that robust nature of being a wild plant. You put that in, stir fry it up. It's a different taste. It's a different quality, but it's just about opening the palate up to some of these different experiences, and so much more opportunity for our gut biome to have better health and a robust nature ourselves in our own health.
Yeah, and there's a big world out there, and there's a lot of things that nobody will ever try just because of like prejudices they have in their brain that are completely just social construct. Like wild food is this whole universe that I love, because it's like, I went fishing off the coast of Texas with a friend, and we caught a shark, and he's like, oh, you can eat that. I was like, I could just eat this shark. And we took it home. I took it to a hunting camp, and the guys that I was hunting with absolutely lost their minds over this shark. And I was like, this is cool. This is what I'm talking about. And, I have zero experience in wild foraging. To me, that's so much more intimidating than hunting, because all you hear about, and it's more so around mushrooms than anything else, but one wrong move and you're dead. And that just intimidates a lot of people. Is it as bad as that? I mean, I know there are a lot of poisonous plants. So, I mean, how careful do you have to be?
Well, I think a great place to, and I do think that hunters should get into wild plants. I think outdoorsmen, I feel like outdoors women, people who hike, people who outdoor adventure, start to learn your environment and do so with wild foraging is a great place to start, because that's part of the presence process of being out there and using your eyes to take in, let's spot what we can eat. It's a whole nother way. It's like hunting, but for the wild plants, it's another way to be present and have an experience that feels so satisfying, that when you find something that you can recognize, you can identify, and you can eat, you just, it's like nothing else. You just feel so part of the net, like this, like, yes, I'm human and I'm supposed to be doing this. This is exactly what I was trained to do as a human. This is it right here. And so I think learning 4 wild plants a year is a great way to start. And just take on 4. I mean, people who buy books and they're, I don't think books are a great way to learn for wild plants. I think going out with professionals, people who put on wild, foraging classes, to be able to go with an expert and have them show you the identification, say in the spring or or the summer, so that you're looking at the different ways you identify that plant. You're with a group, you're tasting it, you're feeling it, you're seeing it, you're taking it in that way, but just for a year, that you really grow a relationship with, because then you want to say, what does this plant look like in the spring? What does it look like in the summer when maybe it's in bloom? Maybe there's something going on. There's a berry of some kind. Maybe it's a leaf that's happening. Then what does it look like in the fall? And then what's it like in the winter? Some of these plants, like the dandelion, are incredible because there's things you can do with it, all season round. In the spring, you're eating those greens, when they're those big dandelion greens, those are so potent and so good, such a tonic for your body. Take those, chop them up, put them in salads. They're so easy to identify. They grow everywhere. Most people are comfortable and familiar with them. So, start with something right outside your backyard that you can just start to grow this relationship with what's growing around you. What's in your neighborhood that you can walk out the front door, walk around and start to say, what are my 4 plants this year? And then you learn the leaf. And then in the summer, you've got that big bloom that you can turn into fritters and just eat the whole puff in a pancake batter of some kind. Then maybe you're harvesting the root and making dandelion tea. I mean, every part of the season changes the quality of that plant, of where the energy is. And that's truly it. I mean, it's the energy. So the energy in the winter and the fall, everything's going down into the root. And that's when the energy exists in that plant, was where you want to harvest it then and use it for medicinal or for edible purposes. Same thing in the summer, the energy's in the bloom. And that's how things are going with our berries and different things. So I wouldn't necessarily start with mushrooms if you're brand new, just because there is that intimidation factor. And unless you go to a mushroom foraging class, I went to one and I found it quite overwhelming, to be honest. There's so many mushrooms, especially where I live. I mean, it's like mushroom land. I mean, it's wonderland over here, and it's cool. I love it. I love mushrooms. I am so into the mushroom world. I love it, but it's been an intimidating start for me. I've learned, I'm pretty great at 3, where I'm I know these 3 really well and intimately, and I still don't personally teach a mushroom class. But the plants I do feel really comfortable with, those I feel great about teaching. And same with stinging nettle. You can eat the spring, that early growth in the spring, and stinging nettle grows all over the world. Everybody has it. It might look a little different, but it grows everywhere, and it is quite easy to identify when you learn it. But those spring greens are so incredible. And then later, of course, you can make cordage out of it. There's utilitarian practices for our plants that can come in handy. So I think for a year, and then just track them throughout the year, track them from everything they're doing.
That's great advice. And we'll wrap up here soon, but I have an observation. The one thing I'm really jealous about, I mean, I love living in the Midwest. I don't have any problem with it. But if I wear a cool cowboy hat, everyone looks at me weird. And I think the cowboy hat is the coolest hat. And I'm so jealous of all you guys out west that just get to casually wear cowboy hats. I got one here behind me on my head that I wear when I go to Texas every year to hunt. But I'm jealous. You just have this freedom that you don't even understand, and I'm jealous of it. I love the cowboy hats.
Well, it's funny because I grew up in the Portland area, and there was no Western wear in the Portland area at all. And then I moved out to Sisters, Oregon to go to high school, which is a small Western town. I mean, my graduating class was 48 kids. Wow. And when I first day of school, my junior year, high school, and half the kids are in, I was like, oh my God, there's cow kids here. There's cow kids everywhere. And it was such an adjustment. I loved it. And I tell you what, we had more fun and did more crazy things. And some of those, the types that can put on a cowboy hat, we have a good time, there's just so I don't know, I'd say wear it. I think you'd probably stand out and look amazing in your hat.
Well, thanks. I think it's just a superior hat. It's custom sized to your head. It keeps the sun off. It just feels so right to wear a cowboy hat. It's like the original American hat. So you know what? Maybe I'll bring it to this region. I mean, there's a few guys. We got a couple rednecks out here wearing them, but everyone looks at them and it's like, that's a redneck. But no, before we go, I really want to thank you for your time. And, I really appreciate your approach to hunting and all things outdoors. I mean, everything you're doing is really important, I feel, in this current day and age, because we're losing so much touch with nature. And my whole philosophy is I don't really care what you're doing in the outdoors. Like if you like to backpack, that's totally fine. You don't have to be an ultra intensive outdoors person like you or I are, because that's where we find our enjoyment. But if the more people that learn about the outdoors and the more people that are comfortable in the outdoors, the more they're going to be aware of like conservation issues and things of that nature and start to care more about this one place we all have to live and share. So, the work you're doing is amazing. Where can people find you on social media and your website and anywhere that you want them to find you, whether it's personal or business related? And we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Paul. My website is wildkindacademy.com. You can find me on Instagram, Jess_Wildkind Academy. On TikTok, I'm Wildkind Jess. And my email's on the website. There's a contact page, and I love it when people reach out. And if you follow me on Instagram, say hello and that you listen to this podcast, and so I can make the connection.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jess. And just keep doing what you're doing. You're helping people care more about the outdoors.
Thank you so much. You as well. I've heard great things about you with what you're doing to really help bring people together and spread awareness. So thank you.